Hi, everyone. We're going to talk a little bit today just about how to build your network. We're going to cover a lot of different topics with networking. It's not going to cover everything that you probably have questions about, but it hopefully covers a lot of that. My name is Laurel Hebenstreet. I'm a graduate assistant in our Career Education and Exposure Office at the University Career Center. Hopefully, after today, you're going to know more about what networking is and more specifically, like how it benefits you. What is the benefit of networking? We're going to talk about where to really begin with networking. Where is that kind of ground level of networking? We'll talk too about informational interview, which is a style of networking that's very specific. And then we're also just going to talk about what tools are already available to you so then you can really start kicking off some of your networking even more than you already have. So some of those basics, right? These are just some numbers, right? These numbers change every once in a while. But really what the numbers emphasize is that networking continues to be really important. A lot of professionals consider networking a really important part of their career success. So building those relationships, whether it be within a job to maintain that career or move on to another one, right? Both really benefit with networking. We also know that a lot of jobs, internships are filled by networking, right? And that's just by virtue of knowing a person and being able to vouch for that person versus all of the applications and reading all the resumes, everything about that, right? It is very natural that we just want to be able to network into those positions. Networking can really be defined as this kind of cultivating of relationships. So that not only means the beginning of relationships, but continuing to build and nurture those relationships as well. So continuing to touch base, right? And not always touching base about career or next move or anything like that, right? Just continuing to build a relationship with a person. It can also, of course, be really helpful professionally. And this doesn't just mean finding that open position. It also means, maybe getting a raise or moving up, finding that internship, volunteering, or just figuring out a career in general. Like, how do I get from point A to point B? Networking also really, really helps with that and is kind of going to be the main focus of what we're going to talk about today because that's kind of the main focus of college campuses when it comes to networking is really building up that career path and figuring it out. Some of those other benefits that I know we all already kind of know, but maybe some that we don't, is networking builds those long lasting relationships, right? They continue to be something that you get to use, right? So continuing to foster those relationships is super important. We can also gain industry and company specific insights. So this is like your job shadowing, your informational interviews that we'll touch on. Really being able to suss out from someone on the inside what an industry or a company is really like. We can do that online research as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it's a lot more comforting to talk to a person who's in that role, who has worked for that company, to be able to really get that insight so then we can assess if that is the right move for us. We also get to share ourselves with others, right? And I really think that's at the heart of networking. And that's what makes networking a lot more digestible is understanding that you're talking to someone who has shared interest and shared goals, similar experiences potentially, and really just getting to exchange ideas. Right. And it is an exchange. I think a lot of times, sometimes I even feel like, well, I don't really have anything to offer to this person who's been working in their career for so long, but I do, right? It's an exchange of information because I have, maybe insight on what's happening right now, like what's really trendy or something like that. And then they have insight as to like how the company works, how the different levels work, who would be the best person to go to with my ideas, right? So it's that equal exchange of information. We also get to utilize our network to really brainstorm ideas. If we think about networking as this really open possibility of everyone we meet has something to offer us, something in terms of perspective, insight, skills, right? Really what that makes networking is this big brainstorm for ideas, right? So if we're hitting a rut in a project or we don't know something to research, talking to professors, talking to other students in the classroom, when you get to whatever industry you want to work in, right? Being able to tackle those barriers by talking to your network and kind of overlapping some of that can really help bring about new ideas and that ingenuity that we're constantly looking for. We can also keep track Of industry trends and news, right? So AI is the really hot big one right now. And so understanding, how does that impact my specific industry? Does it change anything? What will it change, right? And just getting to talk to other people's perspectives on that idea, as well as news, right? So if we're teaching, what's the new like teaching style, or what's really happening in classrooms right now? All of that is super important. So then you continue to have a pulse on like what's current and what's new. It's really beneficial when you're a student as well, because that means that you're interested in this field to understand what is currently happening. It's not just the history of what has happened in the field and how we've gotten to this point, but where is it going in the future, right? Being able to talk about that future aspect really can help differentiate you from your peers as well. Of course, networking is also very similar to riding a bike. The more you do it, the more confident and comfortable you feel, right? When you first start riding a bike, it's really new. You use movements in your legs and your arms in ways that you really maybe haven't quite used them before. Networking is kind of like that. You're speaking in a way you're maybe not used to speaking. You're thinking about interactions in a way that's a little different from how you interact with your peers or your parents, right? And so getting used to that, getting comfortable really helps, right? The more we ride a bike, the more comfortable it feels until it feels like, wow, I don't even remember the day when I didn't know how to ride a bike, right? Networking is really similar to that. And a lot of what we'll talk about today really touches on how events here on campus and tools here on campus can really help with those beginning steps. And you can build that confidence here. So when you step out into your professional careers, you feel comfortable, right, having these conversations. And then, of course, we all know that networking can open up those job, volunteer, and internship opportunities as well. Students always ask, where do I start? And my answer is always good news. You've already been networking, right? We've all met people. We've all tapped into different resources. Odds are you've already had networking conversations and you just didn't really realize that they were networking conversations because you maybe felt comfortable with the person or something like that, right? So you're at the center of your network, right? So it's really about like, what are you seeking? Who are the individuals you want to surround yourself by? What's the information that you want to gather from a specific interaction. Part of our networking web or connections can be our family, but also our family friends. It can be our friends and our friends' family as well. We can also tap into our neighbors and community members. So College Park has some really rich history around it. And so being able to tap into that can be really, really interesting. We're also in an area that just has a lot going on. So tapping into that. Also tell individuals like meet your neighbors. Your neighbors are probably doing really cool things and seeing what your neighborhood has. It might be something like a community garden. And even if that isn't something that is part of your career aspirations, getting to meet, say, an older individual at that community garden and just talking about life and experiences is really, really helpful to be able to navigate things and to get some perspective, right? Because sometimes we can feel like we're in this race to get the most done and get these internships and get these job opportunities. And sometimes it's nice to just open up our world perspective a little bit and get some of that insight. Acquaintances are always really great. We'll talk more about like professional associations, organizations, things like that. That's kind of that acquaintance bubble. Work colleagues, of course, always tapping into the individuals that you're working with, seeing what they're doing, what they're interested in can be really helpful. And then, of course, classmates, professors, and any groups that you're a part of here on campus. So, really making the most of the college experience and everything that's around you. We're attending a Big Ten research university as well. So, really utilizing that, right? Utilizing the resources that are here. There's so much going on at any given point. It's really just searching that information and then diving into it. And that can help build out that network a lot. I also always let people know that networking happens even when you're not trying to network, right? I always think of this really specific instance of, I think it was like a long weekend. Some friends and I went out with another friend's parents to a beach. We just had like a really nice beach day. We're all lounging about. And all of a sudden, my one friend and one of the parents start having conversation. She's just asking about, what my friend is studying, what she's learning about. My friend is talking about her interests, right, in different historical events. And this parent goes, oh my gosh, I know someone who works at this historical society with this specific group that you're interested in. Would you like me to connect you to her? Right? That's networking. And we certainly did not set out that day over the long weekend to be doing any kind of network. And so just always being like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I would love to connect with them. What's a good email or anything like that is always super helpful, right? So just being open to talking about the things that you're interested in and the things that you're learning and the things you're passionate about, because you never really know who you're talking to or when the opportunity is going to come up. And then we like to talk a little bit about just intentionality with your networking. So, really, when we think about all those different bubbles, asking yourself, like, what is the purpose of me doing this interaction right now? Or, like, what am I trying to get out of it? Right. So, I'm going to, if I want to know about working at a specific company, for instance, I might not go to my friends because my friends probably haven't experienced that company. I'm going to maybe look, maybe my professors, maybe some alumni, right? We'll talk about how we can find alumni using some online tools. But some other bubbles I want you to think about are those alums, volunteering organizations. So, thinking about how you want to spend your extracurricular time and thinking about those organizations and what they might be able to offer in terms of connections as well. And then trade associations is another one. I honestly had not thought a lot about trade associations, but those are your trade or your professional organizations, right? Do some of the automatic filtering for you. So if you're a kinesiology student, I'm pretty sure there's a kinesiology professional association, or if there is, right? Tapping into that and being able to conduct what we're going to talk about here in a little bit, which is an informational interview. So getting to hear directly from the source, what is it like your day-to-day life in being a kinesiologist? That really, like, you don't have to then do the searching of like who's a kinesiology professional, because you've gone straight to the association that has all of them, right? So I always recommend that to students as well. Also, sometimes they're free to join, or as a student, you can get a discounted price to join these associations. There's also a lot of times like free online resources through these associations. Certifications might be available, typically like industry trends. So there's lots of things that we can gain from those trade associations as well. And then I think often, I know this is something I struggle with personally, is like the what do I say part? Like, how do I even approach this conversation? And really, again, it's that intentionality aspect, right? Thinking about, I'm not going to walk up to someone during a career fair and start talking about what I did that weekend and like my dog ran away, all these other things, right? You want to just be specific. But you want to make it quick, right? There's a time, you want to respect everyone's time. You want to get to the kind of like core part of what you're trying to talk about, right? But we do want to do this introduction that does give information so we can see the connecting points in the conversation. So a lot of times you're going to talk about your degree when you're graduating, if you're kind of in that latter stage. So saying something to the effect of, I'm a senior psychology student. I'm going to graduate this May. I'm looking for a position in blah, 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 because I have blah, 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 blah experience. So you can see how I just connected points 1 and 2 and a little bit of 3, right? So talking about what I've maybe done, maybe I want to go into education because I've worked with kids at summer camps and after school programs. And that also shows why I'm qualified, right? I'm both studying the subject that relates to this, and I've also gotten the material experience, right? If it's something that's really skills based, you can talk about your skills, technologies that you've been able to use, any experiences that you have. You can also, like, passions make you qualified for a position, right? Not only what you're studying, but what you really have a passion for, being able to convey, like, feel really passionate about, um, marketing communication and giving users a really good experience, right? That can take you a long way as well. And then, of course, just kind of quickly explaining what your projected career path is and how the thing that you're looking at might fit. So this is really common with like internships, volunteering, anything like that. Just conveying to the person, like, I'm really interested in your company because it looks like you work with kids in education, and that is just my wheelhouse of expertise, right? So just being able to articulate that. I'm going to play this little clip so you can see how this sounds coming from a person.
Hi, I wanted to thank you again for making the time to meet with me today. My name is Erin Callahan, and I'm a student at the University of Maryland studying landscape architecture. I know that you've been in the urban design industry for almost 10 years now, so I was hoping to pick your brain about what design professionals are looking for in entry level candidates and what success looks like for a new graduate at a landscape architecture and urban design firm.
Right. So in that video, you heard Aaron's not like perfectly polished there. And that's okay, right? You're a person, there's a lot of energy going on. It's okay to not be perfectly polished. But you do want to practice, right? Again, that intentionality. You can also tell from Aaron's little introduction that she did some kind of research on the back end, right? So that explanation of um, you've been in this industry for 10 years now, right? So that shows that Erin's qualified for this position because she knows this position. She's looked it up, right? She's also qualified because this is what she's studying. And then she made that all fit by saying, I'm about to graduate. I'm asking you a question about what it's like to be a new graduate in this field, right? And what things you would recommend for someone who's new, who's fresh, right? And people love being able to answer that question, right? Because who doesn't love to be able to kind of like help someone out a little bit, give them a little bit of that information that can help them along the way. And then we want to take all of this intentionality, all of these like network bubbles that we're talking about, and I want to talk more in depth about informational interviews. An informational interview is basically this really short job shadow. It's something that can provide you with insight into an industry, a career path, what that individual has experienced, an employer, right? There's lots of different ways you can take this. Informational interviews are not formal interviews, right? So you're not actually applying for anything, you're not formally interviewing the person, right? And they should, on average, be 15 to 30 minutes. So these also do not need to be very long meetings, which means they're lower stake, right? I'm not expecting you to talk for an hour and a half to a person who's a professional, right? This is like a quick 30. And then I want to point out that all the information I'm going to cover in these next few slides can be found in our informational interviews module on the Open Learning through UMD. It's a free module that goes on your ELMS page, 0 credits, right? You don't necessarily earn anything for it, but you get to have all the information in one place. So you can always revisit it, right? Because I don't expect you to totally remember everything I'm going to talk about. So having this kind of in your toolbox will be super helpful as well. Before going into an informational interview, we want to do a little bit of that prep work. So beforehand, we want to work on that introduction, that 30-second pitch, right? You can go back and find that video on our YouTube, kind of watch how that is done. We also want to prepare really well-informed questions. So you don't want to show up to the informational interview having like no questions to ask, right? Because that's just a waste of your time and it's a waste of the professional's time as well. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can have those well-informed questions. You also beforehand want to test out the technology if you're doing it virtual. I don't know how many times I've gone to join a Zoom meeting and Zoom suddenly decides it wants to update and I'm like 5 minutes late, right? So just making sure your technology work, making sure your camera looks good, your microphone is working okay, you can hear everything, making sure the background looks good. So just kind of testing everything out. And then you also, if you're doing it in person, make a plan a little bit, right? So if the person suggested a coffee shop you've never been to, you might want to get your friends together over the weekend and do a quick little friends trip to the coffee shop, right? Just kind of suss out what's the seating like? Do I need an outlet for anything? What's the parking like? Am I going to hit traffic on the way there? Just kind of like sussing it out a little bit. And then, of course, you can look at the menu, decide what you're going to get beforehand. Really, anything that you can do to eliminate any extra nervousness or unexpected things before the informational interview is going to make you feel so much more comfortable and confident when you're actually doing the interview, right? And this goes for regular interviews as well. Just trying to eliminate some of those unknowns as much as you humanly can, right? Things are still going to happen, but just making sure that you do your best to test things out, scope out the place a little bit so then you're really set up for success. And of course, during the informational interview, You're going to want to dress professionally. I wouldn't like do a workout at the gym and then go straight to the informational interview. So business casual is totally okay, but just making sure you look presentable. You also want to stay engaged. So I'm personally a person who is really easily distracted. So, I need to make sure that I sit at a chair where my back is to the door because if I'm facing the door, I'm going to be paying attention to who's coming in and out, right? And I'm not engaged in the conversation. Part of staying engaged in the conversation is also making sure you ask those really good questions, right? The conversation is going to be much more engaging if you've done that research that we're going to talk about on the next slide. You also want to make sure you take notes. So pen and paper is always just like kind of best practice because it's very obvious what's going on. If you are a person who wants to take notes like on your phone, I just always recommend, letting the professional know like, hey, if you see me on my phone, I'm just jotting down things that you're saying so I can go back through them later and I can remember them as time goes on, right? So just letting them know that. And then during the informational interview, towards the end, you also might want to ask for referrals. If they brought up someone else, you might say, hey, would you mind giving me Steve's number? That would be great, or Steve's email. If they're talking about a different department, saying like, hey, can you get me in contact with that department? I would really love to chat with them, pick their brain about a couple things, and then best way to reach them. So sometimes we might connect with someone initially on LinkedIn or Terrapins Connect, which we'll go over. But in the future we maybe want to have their email, so saying, I know people get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, would it be okay if I have your email, or what's a good email for me to reach you at, right? Just making sure that we have the contact information so we can continue to cultivate that relationship. And then research is a huge component of an informational interview because it helps you prepare those really good questions. So if you're doing an informational interview because you want more information about working at a specific organization or company, always visit the organization or company's website. At this point, they're probably going to have a website and a social media, if not multiple social medias. So go ahead and check those out, scope them out a little bit, see what their missions and values are, maybe what projects they're currently working on, what their clientele is, right? So then you're going in to the conversation with the baseline information. It's kind of like when your professors say, don't email me anything that's on the syllabus. This is kind of a very similar thing. If you can find it on the internet, why would you contact the person and take up some of their time, right? This is really the opportunity to ask the questions that you can't get from the internet. So asking, oh, what group of people do you work with? That's something you can typically find on the website, right? And if you can't, awesome, ask that question. That's totally acceptable. But always check the website beforehand. And then there's also things like Glassdoor, which are user-generated information about an organization. So individuals who have maybe worked there before, they can talk about the culture, turnover rates, things like that. So just kind of getting a peek at what you're looking at is really helpful. If you're doing an informational interview because of the person, like you're really interested in how they got to their career or what their career path has been, you're going to want to definitely check out their LinkedIn, see what they're posting about, see what they're interested in. That'll also help kind of start your conversation. If they just reposted some article about the new generation of Apple Watches, you might want to ask that. Be like, oh my gosh, did you read that article? Isn't it fascinating that this is going to do this new thing, right? And then that's a really good starting point. Also, just gives you a baseline of like who this person is, what they're interested in. Always looking at organization websites as well for the person. A lot of places will have like an About Us tab or a Team tabs or a Meet the Team, right? So going in there, making sure like the person's title, maybe roughly what they do. Again, just making sure you're really well prepared for the conversation because there's nothing that like deflates your ego more than calling someone like the tech assistant when they're really the tech director, right? You're like already putting yourself on the back foot, and that's not helpful, right? It can make you feel really nervous about the situation. So just really being super prepared and doing the research beforehand is going to save you just so much more time, and it's going to keep you from feeling that stress. And then, of course, if you're doing an informational interview because of the career field or the industry, like you just really want to know what it's like to be a person in this role, you can look at the OOH, which is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. ONET and Vault, these all do really similar things. They kind of just compile all the general information about a field. So you can find like the base salary, skills that people typically have, also like degrees. So like how much schooling do you need to do this thing? And that can be really helpful, again, to ask questions like, I saw on the Occupational Outlook handbook that a lot of people in this field have a doctorate degree. Is that something you recommend? Or, I'm not really interested in doing that much school. Is there maybe something I can do without having a doctorate? Right. So just kind of, again, the whole purpose is for you to get information that helps you. So, do your research and really begin to pull the information that you would find most helpful in this moment. Because again, the goal is to gather information that you can't get from anywhere else besides the direct source. And these are going to help you generate those just super thoughtful questions. And again, that says a lot about you as a person to this professional, right? Shows that you're prepared, shows that you care, it shows that you put in the time and the effort, and that you're respecting their time and effort as well. So it's just all around just really good practice. Talking about good practice, I know those cold emails can be a little frightening. So on that module, you'll see an example of this email, right? A lot of it is kind of like that 30-second pitch. So introducing yourself, saying who you are, also just being really explicit about your purpose, saying, hey, I want to do this 20 to 30-minute informational interview on Zoom so that I can learn more about what it's like to work in data science, right? What are the skills I need? How should I be preparing? And then, of course, always you can offer some dates. If you really have a timeline, you can say, I would love to meet with you before the end of August. Also, just opening it up to their schedule of whatever works for them. Saying you can meet virtually or in person now is great that we have those two options. And then just saying that you really appreciate the time and consideration. So just being really gracious in that moment as well. And then afterwards, the big thing is sending that thank you note. This just leaves the conversation on like a really good note, right? Again, it says something about you as a person. It shows that you really cared about the conversation that you had. Setting an alarm, if you're a person who might forget, setting that reminder, because you do want to send the thank you note like sooner rather than later. But we also don't necessarily want like a 2-minute turnaround. Don't send the email while you're still in the coffee shop necessarily. You can schedule send it for maybe, the next day or something like that. And then look over those notes that you took. You took them for a reason. So dropping in a couple of specific takeaways that you got from the experience, like, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation about your research on child literacy rates. It really got me thinking about how I can work that into my own research interest, right? That's just like one, you don't need to go a full paragraph into what you talked about, just like a quick sentence or two about something that really, really stuck with you from the conversation. And this just avoids sending a generic thank you email. It is a little more meaningful and will stick in the person's memory a little bit more. And then, of course, include any potential next steps. So if they suggested that you connect with another individual, saying like, hey, I reached out to Tom. I'm super excited to get to talk to him about his position at Google, right? If they suggest you apply to an internship program, you can say, hey, I submitted my application. Thank you so much for letting me know about that. Attaches my resume should you want to look it over, right? So there's lots of ways that you can kind of just keep that door open so things continue to be cultivated. And I want to go over some networking tools that are available to you. So I'm actually going to show you how to do these things. The first one is through LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn, I'm actually going to go back to my homepage so we can see this. In your search bar, you'll want to type in the University of Maryland. You'll go to their page. And then on this page, you can see these different tabs that you can click on. I want you to go to the Alumni tab. And then here we can see information on where UMD alumni who are on LinkedIn, we can see where they work, where they live, what they do, what they're skilled at, what they studied, and then how we're connected. That just is like the frequency of things that are in common. Typically, you might want to refine the search in years. So maybe I want to talk to like a semi-recent grad just because things have like changed a little bit. And then, typically this is going to autofill to 2024. Maybe I want someone who's been in the field for a little bit of time. So I want to look at someone who's 2019. And then let's say I'm really interested in software developers. Like, I'm a software developer. I'm really intrigued to see like where people work, what they're doing. So again, this is now filtered in all of the different aspects that we just talked about. You can see what individuals do. So like education really sticks out to me. That wouldn't be something that I would think individuals do. Program and project management, consulting, sales, right? So you can see all these different areas. We can also see what these individuals are skilled at, right? So, maybe I haven't had the chance to learn Java yet. That looks like it's a massive skill that I'm going to need to know, right? So I want to make sure that I have a lot of these under my belt. Um, and maybe some of these that are a little less, maybe that's something I want to look into so I can really stand out, right? So there's some different options. We can see what these individuals have studied, right? And I think this can be really helpful to show just the possibility of everything, right? I would not personally think that physics overlaps with software developing, but it clearly does. There's 245 UMD alumni who studied physics and are now doing software developing, right? So maybe that's some individuals that I want to pick their brain as to how they got there. And so let's say I'm really interested in where these individuals work. And let's say I'm really intrigued by John Hopkins. Like, again, that's not necessarily a place I would have thought would be like a big hirer of software developers. So if I scroll down here, we can see all the people who are UMD alumni who do software developing or software developing adjacent careers at John Hopkins, right? And so maybe I want to know, what it's like to be a woman in the workplace. Maybe I connect here with Katie. But also, maybe I'm really interested with Mohammed is a data scientist slash software engineer. So maybe I'm really curious about that overlap and what that looks like. And there's lots of different things. Becca here does UX research and design. So how does that overlap with software developing? How does she make that work? What's it like to do that at a university institution like John Hopkins, right? That might be questions that I want to connect with her about as well. So again, just looking at all these individuals and seeing what it is that you're really wanting to connect about and how these individuals might be willing to connect with you as well. So you can always click that connect button and then connect with these individuals. Terrapins Connect is also a tool that you have. So this is specifically ran by UMD's Alumni Association. These are UMD alumni who specifically select to be on Terrapins Connect, right? So again, it just kind of filters that down for you. You can look here at your homepage. It's going to generate this information already. Let's say I'm really interested in actually becoming like a professor or a lecturer at the university level. Maybe I'm going to reach out to Kyle here. I can message him. We have one thing in common. We're both driven and inspired by helping others. So maybe that's how I open the conversation. That's the nice thing about Terrapins Connect is it gives you that opening kind of starter. So I can message Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, I'm really, I'm a master's student at UMD studying school counseling. I'm really interested in potentially breaking into lecturing at the university as well. I really love, helping others and being able to teach things. I would love to get coffee and talk briefly about your career journey and how I can maybe break into this field, right? So that's kind of a message that I can send off here to Kyle as well. And right, we already have this thing in common and we're also both alum. So that makes it really, really nice and easy to have those connection points already. You can also just go to your community page, right? And these are all individuals. I can filter it down by any of these different things, just like I did with LinkedIn. And again, you'll see all of these things that we have in common. So then we can talk more about that. This one, right, is directly related to what I'm doing. And so we can talk more about grad school, choosing a career path, right? There's lots of conversations here that can be had. So using these tools to your benefit is going to be a massive help. And then the last one that I want to touch on is using networking at events that the University Career Center offers. We offer a ton of different events ranging from networking panels to industry specific meetups. You can see the sales and consulting one is one that we frequently have. I know we've done them in podcasting, video game developing. There's so many, there's so many different ones that we've done, right, all across campus. We also sometimes host employers to come in and maybe talk about, best practices for submitting an application through them, or they'll bring in some different career individuals who want to talk about their career journeys or what they're doing at the specific organization. We also host these how-to workshops as well. So those are really great opportunities, and the how to search for an internship or job, reaching out via the Zoom messaging to someone who's in the room and saying, hey, you just brought up your internship in tech. Can I maybe ask you a couple questions about, your resume and what that looks like? And then, of course, we have the really big fall and spring career internship fair. So these are 3 days long. You can find all the employers on Handshake. So you can actually do your research there and then go in with a very specific list of individuals you want to talk to. And again, these are all, I think, really low stakes. It doesn't mean that they're not a little frightening, doesn't mean that there might be some stress around attending one of these events. However, I think what I need students to know, and what I even tell myself, is these employers, organizations, individuals come to our campus because they want to talk to students. It is already a guarantee that this individual wants to talk to you. You're not wasting anyone's time because they're already here. So you might as well use that advantage because we are bringing things to you, right? And so really taking advantage of that and taking a deep breath, knowing that these individuals in these companies wouldn't be here if they weren't looking to talk to students in the first place, right? If they weren't looking to connect with students, why would they come to a college campus? So always going in with that mindset a little more. So then again, you can take a deep breath and really think, spend your time thinking about the 30-second pitch or the questions you want to ask or the research you want to do, right? Instead of using the brain space to worry about if they want to talk to you, because that's already a given in these situations. And that is really my whole spiel. Handshake is something that is free to use, so please go ahead and use it. Like I said, you can find employers on there who are going to be at the career fairs. Our calendar of events are always going to be updated with the things that we are hosting here at the UCC and around campus. And of course, go ahead and give us a follow on social media so you can stay up to date on our different events, things that we're hosting as well. So thank you so much for being here and watching.